What is genocide? It's more than just the Holocaust. Raphael Lemkin created the word to describe the systematic murder of the Jews by the Nazis. Lemkin's word was the combination of geno, which means race or tribe, and cide, which means killing, to form the tragic word of genocide. On December 9, 1948, it was the UN's agenda to approve the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, to define genocide and to punish and prevent. Genocide was defined as any act committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. This included killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, preventing birth, forcibly transferring children, and more. People are sometimes under the impression that genocide is spontaneous, but this isn't true. There's spontaneous combustion, but not spontaneous genocide. Every genocide is started with a plan, a leader, a lot of followers, and a lot of time. Genocides are not simple. They can't just be made in a day. And this means that they're preventable. Just imagine witnessing your neighbor being dragged out of their house and then being brutally beaten and murdered. You'd be helpless. Right now, there are 7 genocides occurring. There have been over 100 genocides in our history. How often do we hear about that? Why should we learn about genocide? Well, how do we help fight against cancer? We're not all doctors or researchers, but we spread the word and we raise money for the cause. We may not know much about it, but we know it's right, and we still do something. It should be the same with genocide awareness. People are dying. The least we can do is be informed. In the past 100 years, 100 million people have been killed in genocides. 100 million! That's more than all of the combat deaths all over the world for the same time period. In war, it's soldiers fighting soldiers. In genocide, it's soldiers fighting civilians. And civilians fighting civilians. It can even come down to friends fighting friends. There's no training, no weapons, and lots of death. Perhaps the one thing that's not discriminated against in genocide is the hit list. Men, women, and children are targets. But why does this all happen? In troubled countries, killers are manipulated into thinking a certain group of people is the real reason for their despair. Although this is never really true, the government or leader convinces the people otherwise. And so, they go and kill that certain group. The more a victim resists their death, the slower it is. Entire innocent populations are wiped out by genocide. Anything can be a weapon, from your standard guns or machetes, to fires, bombs, and even rocks and clubs. Machetes are used to chop victims into pieces, and people are openly shot by guns in the street. Fires are used to burn down villages, and torture is inflicted in front of large crowds. People are buried alive, buried in piles, or not buried at all. Communities are eliminated and families are separated. Imagine the worst possible murder you can, and no, it is worse. Overkill is an understatement in genocide. So let's take a look at a few past genocides, so that we can better understand what happens. Past genocides have occurred all over the world. Here are just a few in their order. The first is the Armenian Genocide. It occurred in Armenia when all Armenians were targeted by the Turks. Civilians were deported, abducted, tortured, massacred, forced into death marches, and concentration camps. About 1.5 million people were killed, totaling to 60% of the population of all Armenians. Some people even believe that the Armenian Genocide was Hitler's inspiration in the Holocaust. The next genocide was in the Soviet Union against Ukrainians. It was implemented by Stalin when he ordered new government policies which resulted in mass famines which killed 7 million people. The next genocide occurred in China's capital. The Japanese Imperial Army attacked Chinese civilians, killing 300,000 people, or half the city's population. Following China's genocide, the Holocaust occurred. But Jews were not the only target. Soviets, gypsies, the disabled, and homosexuals were also victims. The genocide occurred in Europe and was implemented by Hitler and Nazi Germany. People were murdered, forced into death marches and concentration camps, and put into gas chambers. The death toll is not clear for the genocide, but it's estimated that 16 to 26 million people were killed. We had a world war to stop this. We started saying never again. Never again would something like this happen. International laws and policies were created to prevent future genocides. However, many more genocides occurred. In Burundi, a country in Africa, Hutus and Tutsis were targeted by the Hutus, and 100 to 200,000 people were killed. Following, a genocide in Cambodia occurred, in which communist parties targeted other Cambodians. The people died from overwork, starvation, and execution, for a death toll of 1.7 million people. In East Timor, Indonesians were targeted by the Indonesian military and killed through starvation and chemical weapons. All of the people in East Timor, 150,000, were killed. In Ethiopia, a genocide was implemented by dictator Mariam and his army, and 500,000 people were murdered. The Palestinians in Lebanon refugee camps were also murdered by Lebanese militias following. The Kurds in Iraq were targeted by Saddam Hussein and his regime with the use of chemical weapons and other torture techniques, destroying 2,000 villages and 100,000 civilians. Because of this genocide, the U.S. got involved. The U.S. finally ratified and signed the UN Prevention and Punishment of Genocide Treaty. However, violence still continued. In Bosnia, Bosnian Muslims were targeted by the Serbians, and 200,000 people were eliminated. In Rwanda, Tutsis were targeted by the Hutu militia for a death toll of 800,000 people in just 100 days. In 1998, this became the world's first conviction of genocide. Following the Central African Republic, the government targeted civilians and eliminated people through the burning of homes and displacement. 1 million civilians were killed, for a total of 1/4 of the population. That was just a few. Like I said, there have been over 100 genocides in our history. Let's move on to present genocides, to see what's going on right now. Right now, in Sri Lanka, Somalia, the Ivory Coast, and Burma, there are violent civil wars occurring. Now, although not everyone considers these genocides, they still have very strong genocide-like characteristics. There's very strong economic, ethnic, and political divisions in the countries. What's happening in these places? Well, there are multiple power struggles between governments and warlords. For things such as power and resource-rich land. Minority groups are also being targeted to be eliminated, as well as aid workers are under attack. Civilians get caught in the middle of everything. Especially children, who are forced to be farmers, servants, sex slaves, and soldiers. More areas of concern include Tibet and China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and many more. There are also 2 labeled genocides occurring right now. The first is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Since 1996, the country has been filled with violence. The death toll is over 5 million people, and 45,000 people die each month. Half of them being under the age of 5. The Congo also has the worst sexual violence in the world, and it is estimated that 1 woman is raped every minute. That's 1,440 women a day. Things are so bad that people are even hunted down and eaten like game. But why is there violence here? The violence stems from fighting for resource-rich land, from rebels of the Rwanda genocide, and from expanding militia groups. If civilians are not victims of the violence, then they're victims of poverty, disease, and famine. The next genocide is occurring in Darfur in Sudan. It is the first genocide to start in the 21st century, but it's probably not the last. The government is targeting Black Africans in Darfur, and the group that is attacking civilians is called the Janjaweed, which means devils on horseback. The death toll is about 500,000 people, with 3 million people displaced. That's half of the population. A typical attack on a Darfur village usually starts with Sudanese Air Force bombings, followed by Janjaweed militia raids. Civilians are either murdered or forced to flee, and the militia loots the villages and enslaves women and children for further use. Dead bodies are disposed of in wells, and the village is finally burned to the ground. So how does this all relate to future genocides? And how do we prevent future genocides from occurring? Well, a great way to help is to donate. You can click on one of the names to the left to donate to these agencies. These are agencies who work to send relief to victims and who promote government policies which help against genocide. Every donation helps, but money isn't everything. Another way to help the cause is to spread the word. Share this video. Problems don't get solved in the world because too many people don't know about them. So, let them be known.